welcome friends to another version of our podcast. I guess that's the name we've come up for it. This time on the topic of creativity, as a part of the readings, we had three readings. One was the Mishra and Kaler, Kaufman and Sternberg, and our good old friend Csikszentmihalyi. Anyway, you should know these two guys already. If you don't, if you haven't had a class with Kaler, this is what Matt Kaler looks like, a pretty cool looking guy with sunglasses and even without sunglasses. Anyway, so the paper is about TPAC, and that's not the prime reason why we wanted you to read this article. So I'm not going to go into the details of it, but pretty much that the idea that teaching with technology is what we call as a wicked problem. I think we'll have some reading on that down the semester. And that good teaching lies at the intersection of technology, pedagogy, and content, and there is, again, the transactional relationship, a word that we keep hearing quite often in this class. So, good teachers or expert teachers either consciously or unconsciously do this, and they navigate this space that is created by these three elements, and of course these work within particular specific contexts. And we use this, the reason why I wanted you guys to read this paper was this is the only place where I found where which talked sort of clearly about how do we define creativity. Most places define creativity in certain specific ways, and it's because it is a difficult thing to define. So way back in 1964, the case came up in the Supreme Court about pornography, and Justice Potter Stewart famously said that I know it when I see it. And I think very often creativity gets discussed in that manner. So in this paper, we try to sort of do a threefold way of thinking about creativity. Well, the first is that a creative idea is new, which is sort of our standard way of looking at creativity, right? So it's fresh, it's unusual, unique, it's surprising, so on. So that's how you end up with commercials of barfing horses or something like that to sell beer, right? During the Super Bowl and so on. But however, that's not enough, because just like this third fork from the left shows, excuse me, just because you are unique doesn't mean you're useful. So clearly a creative idea has to be effective. It has to do something. It has to be valuable, important, significant, so on and so forth, right? Now, but I think that most definitions of creativity sort of stick to these two, novel and effective. But we have argued, and I think Sternberg and others have argued as well, that there's sort of a third piece to it. And I want to start with an example from Don Norman, who we read last week. And these are sort of three teapots that he keeps in his house. And one of them, I think the one on the right, is one that he uses on a regular basis. It sort of tilts, and you can hold it up straight so the tea can seep. When you don't want it to, you can tilt it so that it doesn't seep anymore, and so on. However, he also has the one in the middle, which is designed by some famous designer, and I think he claims that he has it there to show off to people that, he's this cool, design-oriented kind of guy. Now, the most interesting one is actually the third teapot, which actually is an impossible teapot. If you try to pour water from, hot water from it, you'll actually scald yourself, burn yourself. So why have something which is non-functional? And I think that you have to look at the larger context within which it functions. So even though an artifact may be non-functional in the traditional sense of being a teapot, it is functional in the sense of showing off or giving an image of somebody who's playful and likes design, and so on and so forth. So the third element that we talk about is that a creative product is whole. It is organic, it is integrated within a broader context, and so on. So a creative product is, that's what we call the new, is novel, effective, and whole. And then creativity becomes a goal-oriented process of developing solutions that are novel, effective, and whole. So that was sort of the main message from, I think, the first piece that we wanted you to take. The other piece was by Kaufman and Sternberg, which was sort of an overall broad and quick overview of some key themes in creativity. Kaufman is a faculty member at California State University. Sternberg is maybe one of the biggest names in the field of creativity, and he's right now provost at Oklahoma State. In fact, he had visited Michigan State last year, and we had some really interesting conversations with him. He had visited a small group of faculty that we have, creativity faculty learning circle that we have here, and shared some of his ideas about changing the undergraduate curriculum, changing undergraduate admissions, particularly in a state university, in a land-grant kind of an university like MSU. Very provocative, thoughtful, kind of funny guy. So again, this is a broad overview, sort of defining it, pointing to certain ways of thinking about it. And I think the most important thing for you guys to take away from this is the list of references that they give there, that those could be points of departure if you wanted to learn and read more about it. The third piece we had, given that we've sort of looked at an overview and we have a definition of what it is our good friend Csikszentmihalyi, who we shall meet again this week as well. His biggest contribution, and I think the main thing that, again, we wanted you to take from this, is that to stop seeing creativity as an individual trait, but rather that it exists, again, the T word, transactional relationship between a domain, a field, and an individual. That creativity is never in the mind of one person, though we tend to think of it that way. So unless there is a domain, an area of knowledge which has certain rules and procedures, whether it is baseball or it's mathematics or art, there is no way you can determine whether somebody is excelling at something or not. Second, to get entry into that domain, you have to be accepted by gatekeepers. And usually in the sciences, it would be peer-reviewed journals. In art, it may be critics. Though you can see how some of those, particularly in the humanities and the arts, those are being upended by the advent of new technologies, by websites like Rotten Tomatoes, which end up having a significant sway over whether a movie is good or bad, or IMDb scores and so on, right? So you have the domain, you have the field, and within that you have the individual who uses the symbols and knowledge of a domain to create new patterns, ideas, artifacts, which have to be vetted by the gatekeepers, by the field. And there is this interesting tension here, because the field would have a certain way of looking at things, and something new comes along that questions that or pushes against the boundary. It usually takes a while for that change to happen. I won't go into the details of Csikszentmihalyi's. You can read it yourself about creativity in the Renaissance, about this extraordinary creative output over one time. And he uses that as an argument for this relationships of the domain, the field, and the individual. So in order to make a creative contribution to a domain as an individual, we have to learn to work within that system. Learning its rules, the symbolic moves that one makes in it. So you can't be a creative mathematician unless you know mathematics. Now, a creative mathematician might be inspired by his knowledge of the arts and so on, right? Or an artist may be inspired by some knowledge of science. So Escher being an example of an artist who applied mathematical ideas to his drawing and painting. So that's fine, but still you have to work within a particular creative system. You have to internalize the criteria for judgment. And Donald Shawn, who we read last week, talks about another piece about this inner gyroscope, and that a big part of learning, and particularly in the design fields, in the professional fields, is developing this inner gyroscope. This inner gyroscope which will tell you sort of instinctively or with thought whether something is in that field is good or bad. And of course, finally, you have the personal motivation of enjoyment and intrinsic desire to play and work. So we are not getting into motivation in this class. We are sort of assuming that exists. But Kerry Rosseth teaches an awesome class on that. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend that class strongly. Finally, in terms of this class, I think reading, understanding these definitions is important for getting a toehold into the area of creativity. The role of creativity in design, it's complex, it varies by context, and again, this sort of transactional, again, a word that we use quite often, relationship that exists between them. And finally, to reflect on both the radio project that you're doing now, in terms of understanding the creative processes. If you combine the readings from last week, let's say the Cross and the Shawn readings, with the readings that we have now, with both the large design project you're working on, as well as the radio piece that you're doing now, I think there are some interesting connections and that you can make, and that we would like to see you make in that work. That's it. So till we see you in class next week, have a good one, and we'll see you on the forums and then in class. Bye.